is mock drafting for the organization ahead of the draft, especially picking
For
first?
for us,
For you, yeah, not
like
us.
our mock draft or
Yes,
your all's
the
mock
inter-
draft?
The internal, that you guys do. Yeah.
I don't know. We really try to stay cognizant of the public perception of players. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Um, we go through an exercise and we try to mock 3 rounds. It's always kind of a worst case scenario because everybody in the room that gets to pick picks the ones we like, and so you end up with nobody you like in our mock drafts because we've taken them all before we pick. But we go through the exercise and it's almost like a worst case scenario for us. And if you feel good about who we end up in that exercise, you know you're going to come out of the draft feeling pretty good.
See what y'all did pretty well for agency, getting Chidobe and Eli, and guys who were starters for you guys last year. Why were they able to be so successful with the certain traits that you guys saw that ended up playing out and coming to fruition on the field?
They like football, and they're prideful of their play, and they prepare, and they have the physical traits we look for, and they had some proven qualities, throughout the tape that we studied on them, proven NFL qualities. And like I said, the number one thing, you got to have the attitude to play in this league. You got to have the belief in yourself to play in this league. And the guys that we brought in across the board are successful guys because they have the right attitude and they have the right drive and the work ethic, and they enjoy playing the game. And those are important traits to us, and we look for that really in anybody we bring in.
You signed Ted Karras this offseason. Did you sign him specifically to be your starting center, or do you view his versatility and say, we'll decide where he goes after the offseason wraps up?
Well, Frank will decide. Frank and Zach will decide where he goes. But we know he can play center and be a very effective center. We also know he can play both left and right guard and be a very effective right guard. So it was really a positive when he was interested in us and we were able to get that done. Yeah, it gives us flexibility, but that'll be decided by the coaching staff, and we'll see who all's in the building at that time.
When it comes to corners, is there a physical trait that maybe has become more important as the league has become a pass-oriented league?
A physical trait?
That you find that has grown in importance, or you find most important?
For what position?
Corners.
For corners? Speed's always going to be important, but the physical, you want guys that are long, that can disrupt receivers as they come off the ball. That's an important trait. You want guys that can mirror receivers, so they got to have quickness. They've got to have a degree of anticipation. Guys that can find the ball and play the ball in the air is a big thing. But ultimately, it comes down to how they play. Not everybody's going to be missing some measurable. Mr. Perfect is never there, but you have to decide what you're willing to put up with and what the guy can overcome in his play. And if he's overcoming it in his play, then you feel good that he can continue to do that.
With O-line as well as corner, is arm length one of those things that's kind of non-negotiable? If it doesn't hit a certain number, that you guys aren't interested?
I negotiate everything, so there are no non-negotiables for me. Again, it comes down to whether the guy has been able to play effectively with whatever trait that he doesn't have. But yeah, is bigger better, longer is better, faster is better, smarter is better, tougher is better. So every inch you can get is a better analysis. But ultimately, it comes down to how the guy plays and can he overcome it where he's playing right now.
With the wide receiver market exploding the way it is, has that caused you guys to maybe kind of rethink your approach to that position at all?
I think our approach has been pretty good. I think we've got guys in the building who are signed up for multiple years that we feel really good about. I think we'll continue that. That's a position that we won't say we're not going to do something at any draft. I mean, when you have 8 picks, it's hard to go through a draft without hitting each position, and that's a position that we could hit again. And we found guys that have become really good starters in this league late in the draft, like Marvin Jones and so forth. So if there's a Marvin Jones available to us at in the later rounds, great, we'll take him. But it's a position that we always look at.
Do you think that, first of all, were you surprised the way it kind of took off this offseason, the wide receiver market, and do you think it's going to have a ripple effect outside of this building across the league?
You're just talking about what they're paid?
Yeah. And then
I mean, everybody's getting paid a lot, and they're an important component of your team, especially if they're difference makers. So, yeah, does it surprise me that people are paying a lot for them? No, it doesn't.
You guys have a lot of key offensive players that are still on the rookie deals for at least one more season. How much is that kind of front of mind as you guys not only go through the draft but went through free agency as well, knowing that this time of window is going to be finite and probably wrapping up here pretty soon?
I don't know that we necessarily look at our time window as being finite or wrapping up here pretty soon. You know, we want guys that we draft to come in, be successful, and re-sign with us and be here their whole career. That's ultimately the design we have for every player that we pick up. And each player earns a little bit more with how they play. And, you know, it's our job to try to fit it all together, and that'll be something we do going forward. But in terms of changing the way that we operate there, we're going to always look to reward our guys if you can. Sometimes you got to spend the money internally. Sometimes you have to spend the money externally. And maybe we're coming up on a path where a lot of the money is going to start coming to our internal players.
You've been around for a long time and experienced a lot of things, and even recently the AFC North title and things like that. But for what you do, getting the guy that you want, specifically with that first pick that you get, what is the feeling? How does that compare? How does that rank to winning championships, seeing the team succeed on the field for you? Just getting that guy that you knew you wanted, and there he's right there at the spot you have him.
I'll take the championships every time. You know, it's never about what Duke Tobin wants in the draft. It's about what we collectively assess the guy to be. I mean, and our assessments are collective. It's certainly not any one person. And we have a lot of guys working really hard, including our coaching staff, to assess these guys. Somebody ultimately has to say this one, not that one, and put a final grade on them and that. But we do it collectively, and so there's never anybody pounding their chest over a guy doing well on our team that he was my guy. Because really, when we draft a guy, he was touched by an awful lot of evaluators before he came in the building and signed off on by a lot of people. And so it's been a system that's worked well for us, and so I take the championship every time.
But when you've had guys in recent years that are, you know, major impact players on this team, obviously losing played a factor in not getting the high picks, but do you feel a sense of accomplishment about...
Our scouting staff has a lot of pride in guys that succeed. They really do, and that's what they work all year for, is to stock our team with guys that will come in and succeed at a high level, be recognized as that, and when they are, yes, every scout in our building, including me, takes pride in that, for sure.
How important is it to try and project, since there was so much talk last year about Zach creating the right culture, drafting players who fit in the culture? I mean, you've seen on tape what they're capable of doing, but you don't know until they get here how they're going to fit in culture-wise.
To some degree, we do a lot of work to try to figure that out, and that's one of the heaviest lifts we've got. Yeah, the tape's important. We grind the tape as much as we can, but we also grind behind the scenes to try to talk to as many people that have been around that player as we can possibly talk to figure out what really makes him tick. And ultimately, the guys that we've had success with over the years here and recently here are the guys that love football. They love the camaraderie of football. They love the competition of football. They like being in the locker room. They like being engaged with their teammates. They're playing because they love it. You know, if there was no NFL, they would still find a way to play football. And it's not, the driving force behind them is not what football brings to them. That's all great. Everybody recognizes it and everybody wants it. But the driving force behind them is actually the competition and lining up and playing the game. They love the game. And so if you can get to that, you can find a lot of really good fits for our team and for every team.
How does last year's draft on the offensive line, the three offensive linemen you picked, how does that impact this year's draft, and what do you view for them this year?
Yeah, we like all three of those young guys we took, and we think they all can develop and grow. We think we're going to have a good starting five. There'll be some competition there. And then we think we've got really good backups that can come in the game and have proven they can come in a game and provide winning football for us. And so we're excited about the group. We're excited about those three that we drafted last year. We're excited about Prince and the development he made this year. And so it's, I really like the way the offensive line's coming together. I really do. And so.
There's not much, it doesn't, you know, there's a lot, you know, you keep so many guys, and there's a lot of guys already there that I think.
Correct.
Like it, I guess. How would you view it?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I answered with the wideouts, with the O-line, if there's a guy that improves us, that we like, that we think will have a good career in this league, we're not going to pass him, particularly if he's the best guy on the board. But, yeah, sometimes it does come down to a numbers game, and you've got to be cognizant of what you already have.
Sticking with the O-line. Next question about culture. About 2 years ago, every player you drafted but one was a captain. And T. Higgins probably would have been, had he stayed there long enough. How important is being a captain? Do you put a lot of value in that specific reward?
I think they're captains because they have the traits that we look for, so we try to uncover those traits, and lo and behold, when you find a guy that has those traits, they're captains. And so it might be a chicken and the egg type thing, but yeah, that's always a telltale sign. And each team does it differently. In college, some teams have game captains and not season-long captains. Some captains are appointed by the coaching staff. Some are voted on by their teammates. So you've got to kind of get to why is he a captain and how did he get there. But again, the guys with those traits normally will ascend if they're around long enough to be captains on their college teams.
Going back to Butch's question about the O-line, will the results of this year's draft impact or affect any way your decision to put the fifth year on Jonah?
The results of this year's
Yeah,
draft, yeah, we're still talking through that, and I'm not going to break any news on that right now, but that's something that we have in front of us, and we're aware of it.
Duke, how do you view the safeties in this draft class?
How do I view them?
The safeties, yeah, specifically at the top of the draft.
Normally with my eyes. I don't mean to be facetious. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there are some safeties to be had in this draft. There always are. There's guys. You know, if you're looking for guys that are versatile, that could maybe play nickel and free safety, there's some of those guys. If you're looking for strong safety types that can drop down and play maybe a dime linebacker at times, there's some of those guys. There's some that can play both free and strong, which is good. Versatility in the safety area is one of the big traits that we look for because we're multiple in how we play those guys. And we want multiple traits in them when we bring them in the building. So we think there's some guys that are good players. Again, I can't predict what's going to happen in front of us in any round, but yeah, it's a decent safety draft for sure.
Are there things about scouting that you had to do differently because of the pandemic the last couple of years that you've actually found have helped you guys now that things are back to normal? Are there certain things that you've actually said this is something we want to implement now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. We do maybe a little more Zoom interviews with guys now that everybody in our building's comfortable with that technology, and so you can get a really good interview with a guy, spend an hour with him on a Zoom, have them talk football, maybe share video over the Zoom. So there's some technology components that we've been able to take advantage of and have used to get to know the kids a little more than maybe we otherwise would have.
With that being said, are there things that you can only glean from being in person that you can't through the virtual
Well, I think an
process?
in-person encounter is always a little more informative than an over-the-computer encounter. So yeah, in just about every way, the engagement with somebody is more real, and you can kind of feel the energy that is there a little more, the passion that the guy might have, and that you can't pick up, over a computer screen. So. If we're given the choice and we have the time, we would rather meet with them in person.
Last year, of course it made sense, before you drafted Jamar Chase, you talked to Joe Burrow. Is Joe Burrow involved in the draft process in any way this year?
Joe's a guy that I talk to a lot about a lot of things when things come up. And it's a little different scenario this year. It's a little less predictable. And I don't think Joe has the time, desire, or need to grade 400 prospects like all of our scouts. So, you know, we value Joe's opinion, but we lean on our scouting department and our coaching staff for the draft.
Duke,
With
is
your
there,
thought, oops, sorry.
is there a position group in this year's class overall where you feel like maybe the talent runs a little deeper than some of the others?
That's a good question. I think there's guys everywhere. Each draft is weird in so much that sometimes there's a lot of players in one round that we grade, and then maybe 2 rounds where there's hardly anybody, and then it picks up again late. And so this year has those kind of peaks and valleys. So if we don't go here, we're probably going to have to wait until towards the end of the draft to address this position. And so we know that going into it. And I won't get into specifics on how we view each position here, but yes, this draft has some of those peaks and valleys, and some of those valleys that are important to us. We'll have to try to navigate around as the draft goes.
Is signing rookie free agents, college seniors, whatnot, free agents, also part of all of this process?
Sure. You know, they're part of the evaluation process because they go through the same. We spend as much time evaluating a 7th round player as we do a 1st round player. I mean, our scouts watch the same amount of tape, spend the same amount of energy interviewing people around them, and we spend the same amount of energy talking about them as a group. And so the universe of players we feel is pretty well defined. We don't know who's going to be left over after the draft. But yes, we talk about strategy as the draft goes on, particularly late in the draft. And then we'll talk about maybe positions of importance for us prior to the draft, and maybe some positions where we have less numbers, you know, that we want to attack that position, A, in the draft, and B, after the draft. But you kind of have to wait and see where you've drafted to really find out exactly what numbers you need after the draft. But it's something we think about a lot, yeah.
You've had success with non-combine players down through the years. What is the, you know, you talk about heavy lifting. What's the heavy lifting you have to do there, maybe compared to guys you've seen in the combine? Does a lot of it come down to the visit, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've put the same amount of work in those guys. We don't know who's going to be invited to the combine when we're out in the fall evaluating guys. And so as soon as the combine list comes out, that's always one of the first exercises we do. Who was left off? Who do we like that didn't get invited? And yes, we put focus in on those guys. And a lot of times we try to bring those guys into our building here to A, get a physical on, which is important because we won't have a physical on them from the combine, and then B, get to know them a little bit, knowing that because they weren't invited to the combine, they might linger a little bit longer in the draft or maybe go undrafted. And so we want them to be comfortable with us, and we want to be comfortable with them. A lot of times those are guys that we end up drafting late in the draft process.
How did your dad's success as a team builder impact what you look for in the draft?
Oh, my dad has impacted me more than anybody in my life. I mean, so I like to think the way that I am is because he was the way he was. So I've been watching him work for my entire life, you know, 52 years. I've been around NFL football and watching how he conducts himself, and what he looks for in players, and what he looks for in putting together a team. So, I mean, I like to think I'm just a mirror image of him, you know, less hair.
A lot of times when you're evaluating prospects, it comes down more to traits than production at the college level. What about kick and punt returner? Can you see a guy that hasn't had any experience doing it being one, or if you're looking for a returner, does he have to have experience in the college?
I would say that you wouldn't feel good about it if he's had no experience. You might believe that he could, but you're not going to know until you get him in your building and actually try him out at it. So it's a steep climb. If the guy's talented enough, they can make that transition. There's guys who have returned punts and kicks in the NFL that didn't do it in college. But it takes time, and it takes enough time to make the coaching staff believe that you are reliable, A, will catch it, and B, make the right decision with it after you get it. So it takes a little time. It's easier when the guys had 4 years of, fielding punts in live game action. It's different than fielding a punt in a practice. Fielding punts when they're coming full speed and you've got no protection, you want to see that. If you're taking him just to be a returner, you want to see it on the college game before you feel good about it.
You've got kind of reliable punt returners on the roster, but maybe not a threat to take it to the house type. Do you consider that a need?
I'll let you tell those guys that. Yeah, we'll look at guys that can return. We value the ball. Especially with our current team, we want the ball. We want our offense after the play's over to be running out onto the field. Now, if we can score, that's a bonus. If we can flip the field position, that's a bonus. But we believe in our offense, and we want the ball. So that's the first priority with the punt return unit. And then whatever else they can get beyond that, that's great. But at the end of the play, we need the ball. And I think a lot of teams are that way. If we didn't believe we could move the ball or score, then maybe we would be trying to manufacture it in different ways. But if we can get a punt returner that scores, we'll take it. If he scores and the offense doesn't get to go out there, we'll take that one every time. So we look every year for guys that have redeeming traits on special teams, not just the returners, but guys that cover well on punt team and guys that cover well on kickoff team in college. Those are traits that are important for guys that don't start on your team. So we spend a lot of time trying to uncover whether those guys have those traits when they walk in the building.
What traits do you value at tight end?
Well, I like big, fast, strong, and tough. I like guys that catch the ball when it's thrown to them. I like guys that can separate man coverage. I also like guys that can find the soft spot in the zone, which is a big part of what a tight end does. Availability to the quarterback. Does he have a natural feel to be available to the quarterback? Can he slide away from underneath coverage? Does he have that ability, and it's an innate ability to know where the opening is. I think if you can't block, it's very difficult to use you. I think you've got to have some degree of blocking ability. Otherwise, they'll just consider you a wideout and play you accordingly. So obviously the game has gone to a passing game, and so you would maybe say that the receiver type tight ends are a little ahead of just the blocking types, but you need those blocking types that they can make your offense work.
Everyone good? Perfect, thank you, Duke.
Thank you.
Thanks, Duke.
All right, guys.
You can take the rest of the weekend off.